Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Tony Sirianni podcast. I am thrilled to have David Gehn with us today. David, welcome. He's the king of all attorneys. He works, he speaks at a lot of our events, and he's always got a good take on, what's going on in our industry. I guess what sparked the idea of this contest was an article we had written about J.D. Power and how 30% of advisors are interested in moving. I'll tell you, that's almost a steady number because you see that kind of on an annual basis, but it's a little bit higher than usual. So we wanted to sort of go into that. I also wanted to talk to you about some general questions I have about a bunch of legal trends that I see going on that aggravate me a little bit. So welcome, Dave.
Thanks for having me, Tony. Pleasure.
Sure. So my first, and we've talked about this before, I think. So the first thing I want to just hit on with before we get into the trend of guys moving is the hypocrisy of a firm in the morning going to a federal judge and getting a TRO on an advisor who's leaving, taking state secrets with them. And then in the afternoon, they're in front of the same federal judge arguing the opposite side of the case that they just took a guy from another firm. How does that stand? And how does that stand with a judge?
Well, often not well, but you know, factual circumstances are presented to the judges and the courts, which I understand could be deemed hypocritical. But the argument, of course, would be that there's a contrast between the facts and circumstances underlying where we're defending the case, where, of course, the advisor we're defending followed the rules, and when we're prosecuting one which is factually distinct because that is the advisor who didn't follow the rules of the
Well,
law.
see, that's interesting because what are the rules, right? No one's everybody backed out of the protocol, so there's no rules. We sort of it's a protocol in breach, right? Like we acknowledge that the protocol exists, but they're not signed up for it, so they're not legally bound to it, yet they argue around it. What other rules are there?
Well, fundamentally, you're arguing over the definition of a solicitation, typically
Yeah.
in those instances. And there's within the legal circle, there's a very famous quote by a former Supreme Court justice about the definition of prostitution, where he knows it when he sees it, but can't
Right.
specifically articulate it, and comes back to what is or is not a solicitation, which varies not only state by state, jurisdiction by jurisdiction, but judge by judge.
And also, well, right, because and then the other piece of that is um, not just solicitations, but the contracts that create these solicitations, right? Those are coming under pressure, at least from the
Yep.
Biden administration, as was there, right? And states like California, Massachusetts, judges, I'm assuming, are taking that into account as well.
Well, it's an underlying current. The recent proposed FTC rule regarding the lack of enforceability of the non-competes is being challenged on multiple fronts. But I think the underlying tenor is to go away with that. But it's usually not the non-compete that is prevalent in these actions. It's more the non-solicit. It's not you can't have a job, although that
Right.
certainly occurs. It's more you can't service these particular clients.
And the problem with that in an age, and we're going to talk a little bit about, how the new technology is affecting, the advisor business in general, but in an age where I have a LinkedIn, I've got a social Facebook, these clients are friends, you have everybody's number in your cell phone, you see them at the club. I mean, come on. It just becomes ridiculous that you're not going to run into a solicitation issue, when the world is connected like it wasn't before.
Well, towards your point, and we have assisted hundreds of
Yeah.
advisors through the years in transitions, firm to firm, platform to platform, pre-protocol, protocol, post-protocol. And we're super active now because of, in part, what JD Power just reported on. But the It's a lot easier now to move. And when we counsel clients, to your point, we discuss the realities of the various social media and business social media related platforms, the connectivity to the client, and talk about client choice.
Yeah.
and we put it in an overall context of, kind of what you can do and what the reality is, and fundamentally it's customer choice.
And right. And so I would think that, the judges and everything else in my mind ought to if you're going to err in for the customer so that the client has a chance to at least make a choice. You know what I mean? Let them know where I think it's wrong not to tell them where your advisor went or that he's no longer. I mean, they tend to do. This brings up another issue, weaponizing U4s, right? When they say, oh, he's no longer with the firm. I'm sure you've had a bunch of those cases.
We deal with U5 language
U5, I'm sorry.
routinely. Also, we within resignation letters reference or recommend referencing notice to members 1910 several years ago, which is a reminder to members and member firms that if a customer asks the whereabouts, the contact information of the departing advisor, they're reminded of the obligation to provide it. Gee, why FINRA has to do that, remind someone to tell the truth, a little bit beyond me. But and not surprisingly, and we forewarn advisors in connection with their moves, don't be surprised if unfortunately that guidance isn't followed, but just let us know, and we'll take the appropriate steps.
In regards to sort of, we talked a little bit about the current state of the marketplace. There's so much movement. You referenced the JD Power thing. We also talked about, let us know some of the reasons that you think that's going on. And we talked about COVID, for instance. And
sure. Well, one of the things really, not addressed by JD Power as much, and they certainly hit the high points, but it's a deeper analysis, is the impact of COVID. A lack of need for the office, a lack of requirement to return to the office. It's not just financial advisor based, it's compliance department based, legal department based, support, operations, and everything. So it definitely provides the advisor, and technology worked, and it works. So it gives them the knowledge and confidence to know I'm not really bound by the institution that I'm affiliated with, whether employee or otherwise, that I have to show up 5 days a week in an office to get all of the necessary elements to run my practice. And that's
and by the way, that's the sale point for the high touch. You're paying sort of the wire type environment that you're paying for all this. You're paying for the office with the nice meeting rooms and the high end assistants and the support staff and the management, the compliance. I mean, you're paying for that.
correct.
But if you're home, you don't need it.
And one of the things noted in the JD Power was technology and support as a driver in decision making. Well, that could be a driver in decision making in terms of staying, departing to another firm, or going independent, or in other words, choice and choice of what's best not only for the advisor but of course the clients. Also, go ahead.
Our surveys, so the research that we've done on our culture survey and things like that have shown that, advisors, which is probably not a surprise to you or to others there, but advisors by a large margin, like 80 something percent, skew conservative or even, certainly at least right leaning. It's like 60 something percent conservative, another 20, pretty conservative, and then about 20 or so percent sort of on the more liberal side. And that's been a political thing over the last few years as the country has had issues. So wondering what that has an impact on.
I could tell you firsthand in dealing with a number of advisors that have decided to move. In part, it's fueled by politics being injected into the culture and into the workplace, and various policies and procedures implemented that, whether or not it's and we're unfortunately seemingly in a fairly fractured country along political lines, and certain of the policies that are implemented naturally will be wonderfully supported by those in favor of that side. But if you're on the other side, it could be quite detrimental, and not only to the advisor, but also to the client base. And the client base could be disappointed with the policies and procedures and public proclamations of various entities. And I've had multiple advisors that I've moved with that, based upon culture and fundamentally politics, have decided that that was a significant driver in the decision to move.
Yeah, well, look, cultural factors, right? That changes a firm's culture one way or another. So cultural factors are always a big driver, and firms that are out there, they always tout their cultures as sort of, hey, we have a great culture, right? The other the other dilemma that is out there in general is that advisors face a dilemma that's like the professional athlete. It's like when I call it a game, you call it a business. When you call it a business, I call it a game, right? So when you want me to, I'm an entrepreneur when you want me to pay for my assistant, but I'm an employee when it comes to I want to leave or do anything with my book.
100%. And I work, ironically, with uh, a substantial number of professional athletes in the NBA and NFL, and there are clearly, uh, certain similarities which I share, by way of, in speaking with athletes, I could dovetail towards the financial advisor community and vice versa to give out of, profession examples and similarities,
Yeah.
100%. And
Yeah.
also, quite frankly, the law, based upon the FTC's rule, even if not directly applicable, the protocol, to the extent that it's still applicable, and other things, and the advances in technology, social media, and interactivity between advisor and client, it's a lot easier to move than it used to be successfully.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I remember when we moved, we used to have 1,000 copies and papers, and you'd mail them out FedEx that on a Friday. That's why you left on a Friday, so everybody would get it on a Saturday, and then you're running around trying to get signed paperwork. You could sign paperwork today is something you could do electronically.
I remember being in the weekend working on the
Yep.
court applications that we try to file on Mondays and Tuesdays. So it's really quite different. And because you're not in the office as much, it gives you greater time to interact with the client base. As you very, very well know, the movement through the years has been away from commission-based transactional, which the regulators disfavor in any event, and towards fee-based. And the role of financial advisor has morphed through the years into more of a relationship management, and thus the relationships have become deeper.
So, I mean, this is a generalization, but would you say advisors following the protocol are much better off than advisors not following the protocol?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, to the extent it applies, we say basically it's a 1.5 page document. Read it. We can discuss it. Doesn't take that long. It's not that complex. Follow it, because sometimes actions are filed literally based upon not following the protocol, which you're grabbing potential defeat from the jaws of victory. It's
Right.
not that difficult. You should be able to move,
Yeah, and I
particularly
think
the benefits.
And I think the protocol has had an impact. It is the accepted norm, even if it's not accepted by certain firms. I would hope that judges would be able to look at that and say, this is sort of common practice anyway.
Yeah, and by the way, even dovetailing back to the COVID, which caused people to reflect philosophically as a generalization, about life, career, and otherwise, which is why a lot of folks haven't returned, full time to office in evaluating what's important to them. Um, you know, Financial advisors are understanding like that what they're doing is a career, is a profession, is a business. Not only are you providing financial advice to your client, but you know what, you could give it to yourself. And the firm has been there before you, will be there after you, and are you doing what's best for you and your clients? And if not, there's an abundance of choice. People are thinking about it more, and
Yeah.
being presented with greater opportunity, and their eyes and ears are open more. Whereas, and just by way of example off the top of my head, Merrill Lynch, Thundering Herd, years ago, you went to Merrill, the high statistic, you stayed at Merrill for your
For
career.
life, for life. Yeah, it was
Yep,
life.
pro life. And that's not to disparage Merrill whatsoever. It's just things are different now, and people are realizing their own value as the financial advisor community, as opposed to just discussing the value of the client's small business, the client's portfolio, and they're being presented
Well,
again opportunity abundantly.
it's just a non-virtuous cycle when you're paying mercenary wages. These big firms who have deep pockets drive that marketplace.
Yep.
So the biggest deals are coming from the wires who are the most affected by
Correct.
this. So it's like the more people leave, the bigger the deals they pay, the more they impact it starts people thinking. I mean, you could be a good loyal soldier and then you have $1 million practice, but if someone's going to give you $3 million in a shop, you're crazy not to consider it. And when you start considering it, well, where could I do that? Right?
Correct.
And
We
today,
have those valuation determinations all the time. And, should you get paid to stay as opposed to take a competitive offer? Uh, is it worth it to what platform, what opportunity? Yeah, if you're an employee model, you may get that payment. If you go independent, you own the book, that asset has significant, commercial value as well. And then there's, a ton of PE money out there as well. Firms are wanting to keep assets naturally under their own umbrella. They're financing buy, sells, and succession agreements under their own umbrellas. There's just a whole host of activity and opportunity. And
there are.
it's not that complex.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's also times when, in my mind, the firm's justified in going. And we write about it all the time. There are egregious examples of, people doing stupid things when they leave, and also you see a lot of these people signing sunset agreements and succession agreements, and then taking the clients. I mean, that's just a breach of contract, breach of trust. It's a breach of faith. I mean, that's you deserve what you get. In my, that issue.
We get called with what I'll call buyer's remorse issues, not infrequently either. And we discuss, again, the remedies and the cost benefit, risk benefit associated with all decision making.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and by the way, if 41% or 34% of independents or employees say they're contemplating leaving, it does mean the majority don't. Movement isn't for everyone, but and I give this guidance, whether it's to a professional athlete, to a financial advisor, or otherwise. An educated choice leads to a better choice. And if you evaluate where you are and what the alternatives are, you can have great peace of mind knowing you've made an informed decision. And generally, you'll make the right decision. And I think the advisor community, it's opening up its eyes and ears collectively to try to evaluate what's out there and the decision making tree
So
associated.
10 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
or a little more than 10 years ago, when I started Washington Wealth, which later became Kestra Private Wealth, um, we had to educate advisors as to what independence was. I mean, they didn't really understand,
Mm-hmm.
what it was. And so it was a matter of really getting to know them, educate them to take a look. No, not to come, just to take a look at what the opportunity was, understand the tax implications and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Now, today, I think every advisor looks independent as one of the options that they have because they hear so much about it. You know, um, where do you think that's going? Because your business must be, I imagine, when people look at independent stuff, they're asking you, can you evaluate this equity, this partnership? Do you understand this paperwork? I mean, how much of that are you doing?
Oh, all of the above. And it really depends upon the advisor, the practice, the size, the geographic region, age of client base, number of clients, future career trajectory.
But
Um,
even to understand, like most advisors, I always look at it like it's the cobbler's kids have no shoes. They're very good at advising their clients. They're not so good at taking a
correct.
look at equity on their own. So they don't understand what a waterfall is. They don't really understand how PE works, or they don't want to understand. They're not going through they're not asking the right questions.
Well, Tony, it's really interesting you say that. I was having a conversation with a client yesterday who is in the business of, speaking with small business clients about a liquidity event and
Right.
educating them about the process, preparing them for a process, executing the process. And oftentimes without the conversation, without they have no idea what the value, the small business owner that is, no idea what the value is, no idea what's involved, no idea how to do it. And it's kind of the same with the financial advisor. When you're in your own space, you don't realize necessarily the value you are commercially. And we have those conversations and we talk about what's beneficial for the advisor and or team, depending upon it could be remain where you are. Sometimes the fit within the traditional bulge bracket firm is working out just great. And it's fine
Yeah,
for
no,
you.
it's for some people it
And
works. I think it does work out great. But again, you have a lot of people going on the independent side where they're
yep,
being offered equity in these new firms.
yep,
They don't understand what that entails,
correct.
and there's a lot of paperwork associated with it
Yep.
that's it's like Greek.
Yep, no, 100%. And they don't know the valuation. They don't know, it's great to get the money or the cash infusion, but you have to realize what the give up is. If someone's not just making, a PE isn't making an investment just to give you money, they're seeing value to itself. And you have to be aware of what's going on there, what you are giving up, what control you're giving up.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's a more sophisticated version of, and I'm sure you'll appreciate this from your experience of what I've dealt with, way in the past, where kind of movement was based upon just the size of the check.
Yeah.
And I would find that it wouldn't be unusual if the advisor wouldn't read the simple promissory note. They just look for that magic, box, or that's the amount of money. Yeah, okay, come back later if it doesn't
Taxes.
work out. Well, did you read everything else? So yeah, it's much. By the way, it's I don't want to call it necessarily so deep, but it's a new world. It's a new experience to understand.
I think we're going to leave it at that, Dave. That's good, good conversation. I appreciate you being there.
Sure.
And we'll do it again, and we'll see you at
Oh,
our events. Hopefully, we got our
absolutely.
CO then October 9th, and then October
Yep.
10th. Either you or your partner with the
Yep. Yep.
talking to the advisors, the big one.
Always look forward to it anytime.
All right, buddy. Thanks.
Take care. Have a good one. Bye bye.